Good afternoon once again. Good to see you all back here. I think energized after a great lunch. If there was ever an example of reading between the lines, it had to be an insurance policy. There was a time when buying insurance meant spending more time reading the fine print than understanding the actual benefits. Thankfully, product innovation is helping the industry move from reading between the lines to building products that customers can truly understand and trust. Our next panel is on product innovation in insurance. For that, I invite our moderator, Dr. Sandeep Dadia, co-chair Insurance Committee Bombay Chamber and mentor AI Right. A huge round of applause for him. And joining him are our panelists, Mr. S.K. Rastagi, MD, Beacon Insurance Brokers Limited. A round of applause for him too. And Rupam Asthana, CEO and ED, IndusInd Capital Limited. A great heavyweight panel. So over to you, sir.
Hi. So thank you. So I think we are going to touch upon the topic of product innovation in general insurance or life and etc. Your panel is mainly general insurance, so I'll be limiting the questions on the general insurance side. Of course, very expert speakers, Sanjeet as well as Rupam, industry colleagues as well as great speakers, knowledgeable people here. So we all know that innovation has taken a small beating in insurance sector, partly because, of course, ROE is going down, the profitability of an insurer is beaten up. So I think there is now a need for the industry to set up new insurance product innovation setup. And that will be probably the game changer for the next phase of growth. So my first question to you, Rupam, where do you think we are in terms of the product innovation cycle, and where do you think most product innovations are required?
Wow, that's a very large and a very deep question, Dr. Dadia. But if you were to look at it in terms of innovation, and I think it's important for us to really define innovation, right? And in my view, innovation in product should lead to a very large number of people taking up the product, penetration increasing, and the product being sustaining for a period of time. So actually, if you look back, a little back, and try to kind of look at some examples of innovation, unfortunately, the innovation, in my view, has been brought about by the regulator and the government, and not by us. So if you look at the last large product, which really has made a difference to the industry and has led to substantial growth and penetration, it's actually the crop insurance program, which is the PM Fasal Bima Yojana, right? Even now, if you look at it, all the new products that are being brought out are being, in a sense, incubated, created by the regulator. And I think that's a very sad state of affairs, in terms of, and it doesn't speak very highly of all of us as part of the insurance fraternity. So that's where I think we are. I think, we are so focused on creating that big top line, selling more of insurance in terms of motor, fire, and other products which all of us have seen for eons. We really haven't gone beyond that. So we keep talking of usage-based insurance. We keep talking of embedded insurance. We keep talking of parametric insurance. But unfortunately, the reality is that none of them have moved the needle in terms of insurance penetration in India and insurance acceptance in India. And therefore, there is now a need for a complete rethink on that. So first is let's not wait for the regulator or the government to tell us, go and do this now. It's more internal. The second is, I think, we as insurance players, insurance companies, haven't really invested in going out and trying to find out where the consumer is moving. And that probably for me is the first step, right? The second step, in my view, is when we talk of product and product innovation, we restrict ourselves to what is written on the policy. And I think the whole ecosystem, in terms of solicitation, in terms of issuance, in terms of actual product, and thereafter claims, for me, that whole piece is the product. And therefore, we need to look at that from a consumer point of view and then try and innovate it. So that, to me, is something which is clearly the need of the hour. So probably I'll stop here now and get Mr. Rastogi's view and carry on from the discussion.
Yes, Sanjeev, please.
So basically, any product is basically a solution. An insurance product is also a solution. Solution to what? To the consumer's need, whether it is an individual, whether it is a corporate entity. So all product development should evolve towards that need, changing of the need, like the type of product which a gig worker or a casual worker requires, and to a ultra HNI, the requirement it may be health insurance, but the requirement will be very, very different from a casual worker to a ultra HNI. So number one is that focus, I think we are missing somewhere. It is not regulator, it is not insurance company, it is not the distributor. It is basically, we have to have our R&D very, very strong, and it should be linked to the socio-economic environment of the country, because our country is a very diverse country, lot of faith, lot of ethics, lot of languages, many things are there. So if we want to grow really as an insurance industry, we should have a thorough research on the demand, what type of nature of demand is there. Accordingly, we should innovate the product. One size will not fit anywhere. It has to be boutiques type of concept in product innovation. Then I think we will have more trust, more penetration in all those things.
So I think quickly, just to add to what Mr. Rastagi is saying, I think the point is really what are the trends that we are seeing in the market, right? Where is it that the demography of the country is actually moving, right? So I think one of the clear, while we're talking of general insurance specifically, but let me just bring in a little bit on the life insurance side also, is the aging of our demography, aging of our people. Need for more products to help on retirement, on annuity, need for more old age care, and wellness. So that seems to be a trend. And I think, these are the kind of trends that we need to capture in actually trying to understand the consumer. And as Mr. Rastagi rightly pointed out, I think there is a need to go deeper into the unpenetrated parts of the country and really study the consumer there in terms of what is. When there was a survey which was done by a national agency, unfortunately, the consumers, when they were asked about insurance, they said, "Ye kya hota hai? Bima kya hota hai? Hame to pata hi nahi. We don't even know what it is," right? So our starting point is actually a very, very difficult starting point here. And unfortunately, as a society and as an industry, we haven't really addressed that starting point to begin with. And we can then create all these fancy products, which unfortunately will never find a consumer, simply because they don't even understand what insurance is all about. So our starting point today is actually a very different starting point.
So I think what we have seen is, I'm just take a simple example of health insurance. There are more than 300-400 products in the market. So there is, I would say, intoxication, or there is a problem of plenty for any consumer. I mean, he or she doesn't know what to buy from the market, what is going to cover the risk. So can there be a simplified product for and what India is going through a phase, and the 3Ds, what is commonly described as the demography, the digitization, and the age. So the demography. So these three are the 3D dividends which India is getting. And if it's going to be now, this is the now time for the insurance industry to go super aggressive in terms of whatever they need to develop. how do we ensure that these products reach the consumer and they understand the product? Because there are a lot of innovations doesn't mean we make the product more jargonized.
So I think there's a lot to be done. And I think the first thing is, and I have, looked at this as a possible solution is how do we overcome this challenge of awareness, right? And my proposition is actually that all the insurance companies today are actually spending a lot of money in doing various kinds of consumer education and et cetera, and there's a lot of CSR money which is sloshing around. Is there a need today for us to really look at all insurance companies and say all your CSR money today has to go into creating awareness?
Very good idea.
So instead of it going into all these various ways and means, let's help ourselves and help society by helping ourselves, right? So that's one way I'm looking at it, saying, can we club all the CSR money? Just think of it. Look at how the mutual fund industry has moved, right? So can we put that money together and actually invest? The second point that I'd like to make, and before I hand over, is this is a generational thing. It's not going to get solved in 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years. It's a generational thing. So can we create a program which will address, for example, children across schools in India in the 9th to 10th standards? If you look at it, there is a large dropout that happens after 10th, where these kids go into some kind of self-employment, working in their father's shop, creating a small ready, selling stuff. Can we actually educate them on insurance so that the products that can be then pushed out, as you're talking about, find a buyer? Today we can create all the intermediation, we can create the products, but if there is no demand for that, it is all going to fail. Absolutely. And therefore I'm talking about in terms of a generation. So we need to do a lot of introspection in terms, and all of this, is what I believe is part of product innovation, is basically creating that need and awareness. And that is a very difficult thing, and I think we need to address it at grassroots, from the education to creating awareness at school level to creating, pools of money which can actually help us create that awareness. So for me, that's actually part of innovation, the way I look at it.
Yes, basically, as you were saying, Sandeep, that there are 300 policies, 300 maybe plus policies for health insurance, medical claim insurance, and nobody in this house may be knowing the nitty-gritties. It will be a surprise if my claim comes tomorrow. It will be a surprise to me. Some surprise element will come at the time of claim. This is not payable, this is not payable, this is payable, this is, and blah, blah, blah. So basically, product has to be simple, whether it is for corporates, whether it is for individual, whether it is retail or commercial. But the apprehension is in insurance industry, because insurance industry is again custodian of the money of the policy holders. So that money has to be distributed in a rightful manner. So apprehension amongst insurance company is, to my understanding, is if we make the product very simple, smart people can play with it. Yeah. That percentage may be very small, that may be 2-3% or 5% maximum. But if we make definitely the product simple, whether it is still industrial all risk policy, though it started in 1998. Still, if you go to 10 surveyors, to 10 insurance company underwriters and claim guys, they will have different version. And if you go to reinsurers also, they will have different versions of the things. So these things has to be stopped. These things has to be simplified, maybe on experiment basis. Then whatever some speaker was talking about, pull to push or push to pull, that will only come when my client, my policy holder understand the business, understand the policy. Trust comes only when understanding is there. So understanding gets spoiled at the initial stage only. Somebody was talking about 30,000 motor policy, and then 14,000 and something like that. So then 23,000. So we don't understand the policy product as a manufacturer, as a distributor also. And so customers, definitely policyholder is not aware of, he is at the mercy of ourselves. So to me, yes, there is an immediate requirement for long term of making the simple products, number one. Secondly, as Mr. Asthana was talking about awareness. So that awareness has to be there, because making a product is one thing. Make that is aware to entire world, entire India at large, to tier 1, tier 2, tier city is another humongous task, which is a very difficult task. And we should also not have fear from failure. So IRDA also has done many good things, like Bima Sugam is also one of their attempt for simplifying the products, making a combination of a household requirement of general and life insurance together. The product macro level is quite simple, looks like. Once it is being practiced, sometime in June it is likely to come. And all the insurance company and IRDA is very bullish about it. If that leads the simplification of the policy and awareness of the policy, that will be a great game changer for product improvisation in India.
In fact, on the property side, you just mentioned, India has got two kinds of forms. One is a named peril policy. They just mentioned the cause of loss. Everything is covered, what is mentioned there. Rest of the things are not covered. And we have a named exclusion policy like an industrial all risk. So all the things are excluded except what is not mentioned. So, these are the kind of simpler covers. However, the offtake of named peril is more than the named exclusion. So what do you think? And I mean, why is it that the industry is failing? This product is probably 30 years old, 40 years old, the named peril policy, and so is the named exclusion. Good old TAC days. So what should be, why is there no offtake of these kind of product? Because the premium of the total property still remains 7-8% of the total industry premium. And the risk it insures is nearly 50-60% of the total industry sum insured.
See, basically, to my mind, in insurance industry, it is you cannot see one insurance company as a Indian insurance company as a isolation. Somebody was saying, market is soft because it is demand and supply of fund requirements which happen world over. And as far as market is soft, premium are less. So even the sum insured, if we have measurement in sum insured, we might have grown by maybe 20%, 15%, who knows? Because whatever we are underwriting as a risk of risks, that is to be seen in sum insured. We see in premiums. So if premium goes down, definitely my shrinkage is there as per penetration is also concerned or otherwise also. So penetration and distribution, all those things may be seen, the yardstick may be reviewed as sum insured policy holder, because we are talking of very horizontal and vertical also. Rates is something different because like Mediclaim, every year there is a 10% inflation, rates also goes up. Does not mean that is the actual penetration which has happened. It is the same existing policy holders who are paying, renewing the policies. The actual growth is something very, very less. So coming back to your question was why property premium is still stagnant. Yes, because property premium may not be stagnant property, but sum insured definitely must have rise. I don't have data with me.
It's true.
Yes.
So yeah, if you actually see the 2005 flooding levels, that time the total property size and the per mille premium what people were charging, had that event been happening today, probably most of the insurance company will have to shut the shops who are present in that area. So it's just a matter of one catastrophe which can create a havoc. So of course, penetration is something which on the property side needs to be.
Yeah, needs to be there, and secondly, clarity of products also has to be there. because in commercial claims also we see lot of ambiguities. It differs from case to case basis, though factual cases are same, be it normal material damage coverages claim or be it a BI claim.
Yeah.
There are lot many things. And secondly, one thing more. This policies has been age old. There had been the risk which was being underwritten, which was there in 2000 or maybe 98 when this IR policy started, and risk today, accumulation, the pattern, the processes, the automation, everything is sea change, but the policy wording has not changed. So far, the same policy wording without any comma, without any segregation of semicolon and all those things. Still, the policy, same confusion happens. Same confusion happens in election policy. When the policy starts, when the policy note ends, nobody knows. Since it is in-house insurance, I am putting my words.
Yeah, Rupam.
So, they got into a very technical discussion here. I'm going to take it to a little more basic level. And in my view, I think product innovation means bringing in those customers who don't have insurance today. Right? Otherwise, we'll keep saying the same story every year, which is basically the same set of customers, the same set of products, and the same set of insurance companies and brokers fighting over the same thing and then crying hoarse, ke boss premium gir gaya. I think the challenge of innovation is really trying to do kind of reverse engineering and making it simpler. Going back to the survey that I was talking about, one of the reasons why people don't buy insurance is because they don't have the money to buy it. I mean, we are here talking of all of us in this room, but actually if you go down and go down to the socio-economic levels where it's most needed, they really don't have the money to buy insurance. And therefore, what I think innovation needs to do is reverse engineering, is really break down the product into parts which cover specific risks and thereby bring down the cost of that coverage. In my opinion, all the products that are needed are all there. You don't need anything new, as Mr. Rastagi rightly said. But if we, through reverse engineering, can break it down, make it more specific, and bring down the cost to a level that it is really affordable by the person who is sitting on the road selling bananas, then there is a chance for us to thrive. Because through this diversification and by bringing in a large number of policy buyers, we can actually cushion some of the challenges that we are today facing in our industry as insurance companies. Right? So for me, a very large component of product innovation is this reverse engineering.
So just a comment from my side, Rupam, on what you said. I mean, if you remove the top 2% of the rich population of the country that remains with nearly 140 odd crores remaining people, 90% of the asset on their balance sheet is their home. What surprises me the most is they have not bought their home insurance. So when 90% of the asset is on their block. So anyways, that's a question for the industry we all have to think about. So what is going to be the role of IT systems in spreading the new wording, spreading the new product, or making the customer aware of what they are buying or what they should be buying or should not be buying?
See, so basically, tech, whether it is AI, ML, or any other type of data analysis, has got tremendous role to play, not only in spreading the products, insurance products, but in creating of those products. Because once you know the need of each strata of people, based on their income, based on their lifestyle, based on their occupancies, and so on and so forth, if that data is being analyzed in a proper way, then products can be tweaked, developed, innovate in that manner, so that it becomes a ready-made solution to their needs. So AI, tech, ML, everything plays should play very core role in insurance industry, while not only in developing. First is development of a product. Second thing, as you rightly put up, is distribution, making the public aware that this type of solution is there at this price. So for distribution cost, to eliminate distribution cost, which is currently very used, it is based on human element only in most of the cases. The tech has to be enabler for those guys who are in distribution or to the insurance company. Bima Sugam is one of the example for that. If that experiment where insurance companies are directly reaching to the customer, if that is made aware to the customers in an innovative way by tech and by proper upgrading and all, definitely that type of things can be game changer. So tech is definitely very good base, not only for product development, for the distribution also, and for the claims also. So that becomes a core.
So I think, Dr. Arya, the fact remains that technology is today all pervasive. Right? I don't think anybody has, any escape from technology. The question is, how do you use it innovatively to be able to get more consumers to buy insurance? Right? So there are 2-3 things that we need to look at here. One is actually, if you look at it today, and I fortunately have had the opportunity to work with some of these NGOs who are trying to get education through technology, right? So on a smartphone, and smartphones are pretty much pervasive today, the course material is actually being transmitted and transmitted through these smartphones. So is there a way for us to actually embed some of our products into these modes of communication where through use of technology we can increase the awareness and thereby the purchase of that? The second is, so I'm saying, simple products. You have a shopkeeper's policy which has, just a couple of perils covered there.
Pre-underwritten.
Simple policy, right? Embedded in the education that's happening, where the children who are going to set up a shop tomorrow or work in a shop tomorrow realize the benefit they will get if they have that policy, right? Once that benefit, is made clear, and once the benefit is absorbed, that's when purchase will happen. So I think we have to find innovative ways of embedding simple products through the use of technology to the consumers who are our target segment in terms of purchase. So if you follow these steps, and I think that's where the thinking has to go from insurance companies and the ecosystem around in exploring those modes of transmission, and thereby, kind of trying to create that awareness and therefore the purchase. So I think technology, to your question, technology is something which is absolutely key to future growth of insurance at a large scale, right? The second part, so this is basically what I call technology outside. The second is technology inside, which is really where today there is a lot of work which is being done by insurance companies to increase efficiency, to reduce wastage, to reduce the time it takes to do various processes. And I think that focus has to continue, and that is something which will add to what I said earlier in terms of product innovation, which is really saying, can I bring my product out to a consumer quickly, adjudicate and pay claims quickly, get the policy out quickly. So all of that has to be done. So both inside and outside, I think there's need for us to focus on technology.
No, very well said, both of you all. So I think I was just going through a data 2 days back, and I just read something which was very nice, that an intermediary or an insurance company who misses one wave of technology, they are behind by 5 years. And we're already behind by 5 years. The moment you miss the second wave of technology, I think we'll have to shut the shops. So it's impossible for anybody to neglect technology. So that is something which is need of the hour. The worst part is, and today if you go to see the back office operation of an insurance company, and I'm talking about everything which is non-sales, or an intermediary. Intermediary is also now very large intermediaries. So we see their back office, the quantum spend there is actually, it's a more of a support function than a productive sales resource. So that's where the quantum spend can come down by at least 30% in the next 2 years. And I'm not saying that we start removing people. What I'm only saying is efficient use of technology, and those people can do a much better job rather than doing a repetitive work. Because it has been proven time and again, a repetitive work in any technology or any organization is done better by a robotic process rather than an individual. Individual is prone to make multiple mistakes.
See, my point is really that, if you increase efficiency and productivity, you are reducing your cost.
Absolutely.
And if you can pass that cost on in your
Consumer,
product,
yeah.
that's where the benefit really lies.
Absolutely.
So when I'm talking of innovation in technology inside, it has to have a consumer focus in terms of how much cheaper can I make the product for my consumer. So that's where really, tech inside starts to pay
Very well
off
said.
in terms of product innovation.
And the worst part is most of the companies think that technology, what is the ROI I'm going to get? People don't realize they are going to cover the operational risk of theirs, which is going to major risk for a broker or an intermediary, or for an insurance company, a wrong data given and you've underwritten that, no premium can justify the kind of claim which you will be paying. So I think it's a good play. The technology is something which is going to do. Last question to you all. We are running out of time. So how do you think the regulator is going to play an active role in terms of developing and defining new roles for the product and new roles of an insurance company? And in the same question I have, do we see a chance for bespoke wordings, what is there in the international market, the UK markets, the French markets, the US markets? Are bespoke wordings possible?
So basically, IRDA is doing their job. Good or bad, I'm not the person to comment on that. Their regulator, whether they are doing macro, micro, that is something different. But like I was talking about Bima Sugam. Bima Sugam is an initiative of IRDA, which is for policyholders. Lot many circulars, notification have come in recent past, whether it is health insurance especially, and mis-selling and all. So IRDA is playing their role, to me, reasonably well. Yes, but having said that, like sandbox is another things which IRDA has given the opportunity to insurance company to experiment with the wordings, with the pilot projects and all those things. But it's still more freedom is required, I feel, from IRDA for insurance company to develop their long-term R&D and to fail. Till we have experiment to fail, we will not survive, we will not thrive in a sustained manner. So R&D in insurance industry is relatively much less than any other finance industry if we talk about. And where IRDA can play their role, the data which is an IIB is the correct thing, no?
Yeah.
The data. So that data center is still in the mines. The data should be made public so that anybody can develop, anybody can analyze, and lot many tools are there for AI and ML, which can see those data, which can see those patterns and can forecast, can make modelings over that. So that type of things IRDA should give those environment of doing R&D to have these data sharing so that people can experiment as far as the IRDA is concerned. Coming to spokes wordings of Western India, I am not against West, but each country has got different type of requirements, and India is typically having different type of requirement. We can learn from them. We can take from all the reinsurance companies, all the big Lloyds and Munich Re and Swiss Re and whatnot from US market. But we have to Indianize that things for Indian requirement. So, like I was talking to you, like a health policy wordings and requirement for a casual worker to Tatas and Ambanis will be different. It has to be different. So that type of thing where also AI and ML can play a role of based on his income, based on his nature of occupancy, the things can be done. So to me, yes, those wordings can be a benchmark. It has to be modified with the time. Like today, India, we say, is a young population, young nation. But down the line, after 10, 15 years, we will be senior citizens heavy, like it has happened in Europe and all those places. So should we develop our R&D for the products which Mr. Rupam was also saying for retirement, pensions and all those things now? Because 10 years goes away like flying. So we should develop all those wordings, all those actuaries. We have a lot of talent, but the streamlining of their talent by all of us is become our responsibility.
I think people do say data is gold, but I think what we derive from the data is gold. Data standalone is, it has no meaning. Everybody has got lots of data. So what we derive as an intelligence coming out of the data is something where the companies will make or break their balance sheet.
So Dr. Adia, you asked two questions. One was on IRDA's role and the other was on bespoke wordings. The fact that IRDA is getting to design products is a sign of the utter failure of the industry.
Absolutely.
If a regulator has to design products, I think it's time for all of us to shut shop. A regulator is to facilitate and put the guardrails and give direction in terms of growth and give protection to the policyholders and at the same time protection to the insurance companies so that there is a well-regulated growth of the industry. Once they start to getting down to designing products, my God. That's the end of the industry in my view. So that's my view as far as the regulator's role. And I think there is a lot of work that is being done by the IRDA in putting those guardrails and creating those environments in which innovation should happen and growth should happen. But when they get down to designing products, I have a big challenge. I have a big problem, right? In terms of bespoke wordings, absolutely. And, we talk of, and Mr. Rastigi talked about, all those exotic covers that are required because of the changing nature of our economy, the changing nature in terms of the emerging risks. But on the same side, I think, I'll take it on the retail side, and I think there is a need for us to design simple half-page products which are simply worded. Because there is no substitute to simplicity. Absolutely. So I'll leave it at that.
Absolutely. So basically a cafeteria approach for all the wordings.
That, like simplicity he talked about. So if I own a house in Nariman Point that may cost me around 5 crores or 10 crore rupees, if I have the same house in Baroda, it may cost me 1 crore. What should be my sum insured of that house becomes $1 million question to different insurance company, to different surveyors. Simple thing.
Yes, I think with this, we are with the last question. Any questions from your side? We can take one or two. We cannot refuse to the chair of the committee.
Yes.
Because Rupam, congratulations to the panel. Everybody made interesting points, but deriving from what Rupam said, Rupam, one question which has always kind of bothered me is how do we insure Bharat? And you know exactly what I mean when I say insuring Bharat. And I was wondering whether, while traditional insurance has served us fairly well, and we are all familiar with parametric products and the ease of paying out claims under parametrically designed products. So could parametrically designed products, rightly priced with the right amount of awareness, be an answer to ensuring Bharat? For example, let's say there are families in Bhagalpur, small businesses, or remote India. I mean, Bhagalpur is not that remote, there are remoter places. But if we sell traditional insurance products, there is all this hassle of, loss assessments and questions and all that. But, parametrically designed products, and why this arises from what you said, Rupam, was because you mentioned specific perils only being insured a couple of times. So if we can just insure catastrophic risks which can be parameterized, could that sort of a thing be an answer?
So I think it's a fantastic question, Praveen. And let me get down to one step behind. Why is it that insurers are not doing this? Well, they don't know if they will make money. They have to spend a lot of money, create all those products, create that distribution. Oh, paisa banega, nahi banega. Maybe I'll have to burn a lot of my capital. So I think first of all, we have to address that challenge. And I'll have a fairly radical view on that. In my view, one of the PSUs should be converted into an insurance company only doing Bharat. See, today what's happening? Today what's happening is a lot of the capital is being put into these companies. Where is the money coming from? It's coming from the government. Where is that money going? Going to you and me. Is that right? Absolutely not. So my view is that one of the PSUs should actually just be made to do insurance for small town India, rural India, government programs. Because the fact is that all government sponsored insurance programs are not supposed to make money. If they're making money, there's something wrong somewhere. Right? If insurance companies are making money out of it, there is something wrong in the construct of those products. And therefore, there needs to be a focus. I've run an insurance company. I didn't want to go and invest there because I'm not going to get returns, or maybe I'm not going to get return for many years. So who's going to do it? So we have to start it somewhere. And I think we have to be a little more radical in this, which is basically saying, you're absolutely right. These are the kind of products which are no dispute claim settlement. Rain does not happen, parameter gets triggered, money in your account. Right? Absolutely. But I think we need a more radical solution to it. Right? And we need to put capital into it. And that capital has to come probably from the government to begin with. And once they prove the model, then you will see everybody rushing into it. But today it's just not happening. So there has to be a trigger, there has to be a transition that has to happen. And in my view, it can happen by converting one PSU into doing only and only this.
See, parametric is definitely a very good solution in the event of claim, because no assessment, within a few days you get the amount. There are two issues which are still to be tackled. One is triggering point, because each parametrics has got a triggering point. So fixing of the triggering point becomes very difficult, because based on historical data, there are many historical data are available. So which data, which reinsurance company or which insurance company is accepting it at the time of formulating the policy? Because in parametrics, formulation of policy is the key. Claims is a cakewalk, not even cakewalk, even cutting the cakes is not there. Secondly, at the time of claim, when the triggering has happened, when suppose continuously rain has happened for this much speed or whatever it is, 2 mm, 5 mm for 2 days, monitoring that data again become a dispute in India. Because to get which data we are using, which online data, still I have to see those things. That's why globally also parametric, though increasing, but not increasing in the way and scales for which it is meant for, because the promise of getting the working capital immediately is the quick relief. But fixing of that triggering point and which weather data we should use, becomes the. Otherwise, there is a one experiment which is coming in my mind is like Mediclaim, we have lot many complaints of Mediclaims. If we have that type of policy, suppose there is a typhoid, this much amount is given. Because irrespective of whether I go to XYZ hospital or YZ hospital, irrespective of that, disease waste, there had been policies in past, disease waste indemnity amount. That becomes as good as parametrics. So if this is established that you had a fracture, multiple fractures in this bone, this is the doctor requirement, this much you fit in, like personal accident, permanent disability percentage is given. If hand is gone, this 50% is given. Like that, there can be a simple table. What we do in PPA with hospitals, we for each cesareans, for each maternity, for each cataract, we agree to a certain amount. That item can be part of the policy and that indemnity can be given.
Just on a lighter note, let's not underwrite at the time of a claim.
Yes, exactly.
Last question from your side, please.
The question is not from a perspective of a इंश्योरेंस इंडस्ट्री रिप्रेजेंटेटिव. मैं एक कॉमन आदमी हूँ. सर ने भारत बोला, बहुत अच्छा लगा. वी आर डिस्कसिंग समथिंग फॉर अदर्स ऑल्सो. एज ए कस्टमर, हिंदी मुझे इंग्लिश नहीं आता है, मैं कॉमन आदमी हूँ. जब पॉलिसी लेनी होती है, मैं ऑनलाइन जाता हूँ, पॉलिसी मिलती है और मेरा मैसेज आता है इतना अमाउंट डिडक्टेड, पॉलिसी मेरे ईमेल पे आ जाती है. जब क्लेम करना होता है, जो रियल इमरजेंसी है, मुझे हॉस्पिटल में भागना पड़ता है अप्रूवल के लिए. मुझे अगर कार का एक्सीडेंट है, गैरेज ढूंढने के लिए भागना पड़ता है. तो जैसे पे एंड रिकवर कंसेप्ट है, वैसे कम से कम इमरजेंसी क्लेम के लिए ऐसा कोई कंसेप्ट क्यों नहीं है और इस पे कौन काम कर सकता है?
सर बिल्कुल हो सकता है और होना चाहिए. आई फुल्ली एंडोर्स योर व्यूज़. लाइक जैसे एम्बुलेंस होती है, 138 या जो भी नंबर है उस पर आप फ़ोन कीजिए, एम्बुलेंस आ जाती है. उस तरीके से गाड़ी में भी वैसे रोड असिस्टेंस एंड ऑल दोज थिंग्स हैव स्टार्टेड. How much effective it is, I am not very sure of it. But yes, easiness of doing business should be converted in insurance industry, easiness of getting claims. That should be our motto. It should not be premium, profitability. Profitability will automatically come when the client understands our products. When the client understands our product, he knows that this much amount I am going to get in the claim because he knows the policy macro level, then definitely that confidence will come, that trust will come, and with lot many enabler, we will be in a position to serve the client, and premium penetration and profitability will automatically come as byproduct. Yes, claim is the main pain, and we must address it. As a normal consumer, as a policy holder, I appreciate your point of view.
सर मैं आपको एक सच्ची बात बताऊं. ये कहा जाता है कि हमारी इंडस्ट्री में 15 से 20% जो क्लेम्स होते हैं वो फ्रॉडुलेंट होते हैं. सुना होगा आपने? I mean, I'm guessing many of you heard that, right? So the assumption here is that 1 in 10 claims is a fraudulent claim. Now the challenge is that to prevent that 1 in 10 claim, we actually make all the 10 people suffer. That is the reality, right? And I think this is a continuing discussion, and we have to find ways and means of using technology to reduce the amount of fraudulent claims. You know, I mean, yesterday I was sitting in one insurance company, and we were looking at, how documents get fudged, and how AI is now being used to detect that fraudulent change of document, right? So I think the moment we start reaching a position where we can actually, catch those frauds, then the rest of the 9 people out of those 10 will hopefully not suffer, right? So I think we are heading in that direction. Is it going to happen tomorrow? No. Is it going to happen in 3 months? No. It will happen in a year or 2 years? Probably. So we are there, sir.
So yeah, Just wanted to thank the panelists, Mr. Rupa Mastana and Mr. Sandeep Rastogi, for sharing their wonderful knowledge and experience here. And it was a pleasure sharing the stage with you. Thank you.
And it was a pleasure having you all here with us for the panel discussion. May I request our Director General, Mr. Sandeep Khosla, to present mementos on behalf of Bombay Chamber. A huge round of applause for a very interesting panel. Thank you. They say insurance is about managing risk, and reinsurance is about managing the insurers who manage the risk. As India's reinsurance landscape evolves rapidly with reforms, new players, and emerging risks, our final panel for the day will explore the changing reinsurance landscape and what lies ahead for the industry. Inviting on the days our moderator, Akshay Ganatra, Associate Partner, PwC. A huge round of applause for him. And joining him on the dais is Shefali Sehwani, CEO and Country Manager, Lloyds India. Maybe have some claps, please. Thank you. Mangesh Patankar, Regional Head Agriculture, Munich Re. And Amitabha Ray, CEO, Swiss Reinsurance India Branch. Over to you, Mr. Ganatra.
So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. We have a distinguished panel with us today, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to this panel discussion on changing reinsurance landscape, a subject which is very close to my heart, a topic that is becoming increasingly important as the insurance industry navigates climate change, emerging risks, regulatory reforms, and new capital structures. Reinsurance has always been the shock absorber of insurance industry, and in today's world, with risks becoming more complex and sometimes unpredictable, one could say reinsurers are expected to carry both the umbrella and the weather forecast and occasionally explain why it still rained. So welcome, distinguished panel. Let me begin with Shefali. Shefali, first question. Lloyds has a unique vantage point on specialty and complex risks globally. Let me start with the evolving opportunity in India. India is seeing growth in specialty risks such as cyber, marine, aviation, energy, and liability. Which specialty lines offer the biggest opportunity for reinsurers in India?
So thank you, Akshay, and good afternoon, everybody. We are standing in between, I think, the exit and the post-lunch sessions, but thank you for being there. I think we were worried whether we would even have the audience, but thank you for being there. So I just start with a little very high-level briefing or background, on Lloyds, so that just to give a perspective. So basically, tracing its history back to 1688 and the coffee shops of London. Lloyd's was incorporated by the Lloyd's Act of 1871, and it's the only kind of insurance marketplace in the world. Lloyd's has a very unique structure where risk takers come together, pool risk and expertise to protect and advance global protection and economic growth. Lloyd's is also actually developed as almost a pillar for risk management, in the global ecosystem. So when we talk about the specialty risks, I think opportunity is typically seen in the intersection of high growth and high complexity. So from a Lloyd's perspective and from the India perspective, I think we've seen a lot of growth and demand for specialty insurance. And I'd just like to break that question into three areas where the opportunity lies. So the areas would be, one is high growth. So I think cyber is a clear standout when it comes to high growth, because one is the volumes, and it's driven basically by digitization, by the recent cyber attacks, and also the strengthening, the regulatory environment, the tightening regulatory environment that we have. So I think where Lloyd's has relevance in this space is not just the growth aspect, I think it's the complexity. That's where the Lloyd's proposition lies. So cyber is clearly one area of growth. Alongside that, we have liability, that is your W&I and professional indemnity, etc. So that's another area where we see a strong momentum. That's again driven by listings, IPOs, M&As, a lot of cross-border transactions, and also a strong focus on, I think, governance. So again, that's another area where, which is very relevant. Again, that is also another area where it's not just about the capacity that needs to be provided. It's more about strong capability, structuring capabilities, and claim credibilities. Again, that's where Lloyd's again plays a very pivotal role. The next part is the expansion, where there's scope for expansion after growth. So we've seen that marine and aviation is always those are the products which always see maximum share in the specialty sector. Again, that's driven by increasing trade, logistics, and a lot of those things bring in the requirement for marine products. Again, Lloyd's, because of its innovation capabilities, is again at the forefront for marine, which brings the scale. The last part is the products where the future is being built, which is climate, energy, and parametric products. Again, Lloyd's being at the, innovation being at the core, these products are again an area where we see that Lloyd's can contribute a lot, not just in providing capacity, but also in actually partnering and kind of, stepping up this market or shaping this market. So if I were to summarize, I'd say growth, cyber and liability. I'd say expansion would be marine and aviation. And again, where the future is being built is, clearly your parametric, climate, those type of products.
Thank you so much, Shefali. Very, very insightful and very crisply summarized in terms of what is that are the growth areas. Let me now turn to Mangesh. And Mangesh generally is a person who looks after agriculture. So Mangesh, agriculture and disaster risks are a big part of India's protection gap and resilience story. The first question, as everyone is aware, climate change is making crop losses more frequent and less predictable. How is this changing the design and pricing of agriculture and disaster insurance in India?
Sure. Thanks, first of all, for allowing me to participate here. Thanks for the invitation. Back to your question, I think this is not an exact sort of science. When we look at climate, I think a few years back, we used to look at it in a stationary perspective, where we thought that most of these parameters that we are looking at were quite stable. And that's not the case today. I think most of the reinsurers are still grappling with this whole concept of how do I put an exact number on the probabilities, etc., around whether a drought will occur or whether a flood is going to occur and so on. So I think it is an evolving space and also interdisciplinary space where you have to not only put people from finance background but also from meteorological background, agro background, and so on. When it comes to modeling these topics, a lot of advancement has happened. Just to put it very simply, a few years back, we used to look at our pricing in a very simplistic manner where we used to look at only the experience. Now people have started looking at it from forward-looking perspective where they try to figure out whether a particular climatic event is likely to occur or less likely to occur. And I think there lies the crux, there lies the utility of all those complex climatic models. Going forward, I believe that this science will further evolve with more and more AI power coming in, where data crunching becomes quite easy for us. One key event that comes to my mind is the currently ongoing El Nino, or rather the forecasted El Nino, which is going to occur during this year. Somewhere in middle of Pacific, oceans are heating up, and that is creating quite some stir in the way in which agriculture and disaster risk insurance is going to shape up in the coming 1 or 2 years. It will have some impact on the rains. On the positive side, when it comes to Southern America, it will have quite some negative impact on the rains in India. That is what is expected. I think when you look at these climatic parameters a bit more closely, obviously you will sort of figure out certain probabilities and would be able to build them in your capacity computation related considerations. How reinsurance companies are looking at it, it's slightly different. I think reinsurers, particularly the ones who have set up their shops in India, and all three of us have our shops here. I think we are looking at it not from opportunistic angle. Rather, this is more of our way of staying together, staying afloat in the market rather than running away from the market, which some of the other cross-border insurance companies might have a choice to do, right? I think we are doing a lot of hand-holding with the insurance companies to make them understand how these climatic models work, how do we look at it, and if there is a bit of a dissonance between them looking at these products, we try to resolve those gaps. This is the journey. I think within 10 years, we have covered quite some ground, I would say, but still a lot left. Thanks.
Thank you, Mangesh. I think everyone appreciates the complexity we deal with when we are underwriting these kind of liabilities. And with technology coming in, a lot of modeling happening, I think from a pricing and design standpoint, we'll be in a much better position going forward. So thank you so much for that insight. Amitabh, let me bring you in. Swiss Re has deep insight into both global insurance trends and the Indian market. With rising catastrophe losses and effect of climate changes in India, how do you see demand for reinsurance changing across property, health, and infrastructure?
Yeah, thank you, Akshay, for the question. Get asked this question a lot. First of all, it's a privilege to be here. Didn't realize Bombay Chamber of Commerce is 190 years old. Swiss Re is slightly younger to that, but we are over nearly 170. So to answer this question, I would take one step back before climate change. The general trajectory of India and the market towards Viksit Bharat, 2047 insurance for all will actually, spur the demand for reinsurance and climate, catastrophe reinsurance in any case, right? On top of that, of course, we are getting, you can say, even more industrialized with all kinds of industries now under the government's PLI scheme, and lots of onshoring of industries, import substitution, as well as movement from China to India, the usual. So all this is getting, driving penetration of industrial insurance, and industrial insurance requires certainly catastrophe insurance coverage. On top of that, climate change is, bringing in long-term increasing risk, that is frequency of losses, as well as volatility into our clients, which is insurance companies' balance sheets. So they would then need more reinsurance coverage. So there is a supply side of risk, and there is a demand side of risk that is going to come and drive. And there's a further layer to that. There's a further layer to that, that with the change in the risk-based into the risk-based capital regime, which is being asked for by the regulator, again, catastrophe insurance will have a very big place to play in the capital charge of companies. So that also will drive the demand for catastrophe risk coverage or insurance.
Thank you, Amit. Coming back, Shefali, next question for you. As Indian businesses become more global, how is demand changing for complex and cross-border risk solutions?
So I think that what we are seeing is a very clear structural shift for local firms becoming, or local companies going more global. Now, it's actually moving, the requirement is moving from a localized transactional insurance to a more complex cross-border solution requirement. So we're seeing a rise in multinational insurance solutions. So for example, a local Indian company where they basically they expand through either acquisitions, probably exports, or global supply chain. So what they need is a seamless cover across jurisdictions. So where the requirement then becomes a coordinated program which also has global compliance. Now, this is well, it seems simple. It's not just underwriting. It also needs a lot of coordination. Understanding the local requirements of those various jurisdictions, and a lot of regulatory understanding, and globally to execute these programs is again something which is challenging, but yes, this is something that is being worked upon. Secondly, we find that the nature of the risk is also becoming more complex for these entities, because once you are growing globally, you are exposed to climate risk, supply chain risks, geopolitical tensions, cyber exposures, everything. And sometimes all of them hit you together. It's not that any of them work in silos. So typically you'll see that you will have probably a cyber event that will create a business interruption, or you'll have a geopolitical risk that will impact your logistics. So because these things work not independent of each other, there's a requirement also for cross-class products, so that the risk can be managed more seamlessly. Again, the third thing we see is a very major behavioral shift. So the behavioral shift, when I say, I mean that the expectation, so the expectation for global standards is no longer an exception. So when the local firms have started following global risk management practices, and they adopt these frameworks, they're also looking for those standards of coverage. They are looking for those standards of advisory. They're looking for those standards of claims management. So that's the kind of other behavioral shift that we see. So these are the two or three kind of impacts that we see for demand in the Indian market.
Thank you. So Mangesh, next question. I think in the previous panels also we discussed about sovereign risk, something like we spoke about Bharat, and there has to be an entity which is covering or looking at Bharat entirely and bringing products which is more suitable to this country. In India, we have very few sovereign risk transfer products, with only one or two instances seen so far. In this context, how does the availability of global reinsurance capacity influence the scalability and sustainability of such foreign products?
Yeah, it's a very relevant question because I think typically what we get asked in such conferences is what should the global reinsurance companies do to promote such products, to have more and more such products implemented in Bharat. And the answer here, straightforward, is actually reinsurance companies have done a lot so far. They have done a lot of policy advocacy with the central government, with the state governments as well, to make them understand how these products work, what are the benefits, and of course, what are the limitations of these products, because not every product is perfect. Moreover, companies like us, and again, I would say all three of us, we have, committed quite some capacity, financial capacity, also lot of human resources who can help the individual state governments to design these products. One clear example is Nagaland, where both Swiss Re as well as Munich Re had been associated. Swiss Re in the past, currently it is Munich Re. I think we have done a small sort of, I would say, pilot type product for the state of Nagaland, where they wanted to cover their excess rainfall risk. Now again, fairly small state, not tremendous amount of capacity needed to keep that product afloat in the market. But then what is Maharashtra doing, for example, or what is Madhya Pradesh is doing? These are fairly big states, and unfortunately they have yet not launched anything statewide which allows them to tap in those resources, the financial capacity that we can provide in case of a disaster. I think that is yet to happen. Of course, that journey is on. For example, Maharashtra has already set up something to think through and figure out what could be done. Kerala is another example where things are in a fairly advanced stage. I think a few months back there was an announcement as well that the government is looking at these products a bit more carefully. To keep it short, I think there is tremendous amount of financial capacity available in the market from global reinsurers like us, and also from the national reinsurer, which is GIC. Apart from that, there are a lot of product designing capabilities as well, which can be cross-pollinated. For example, we have had the experience of covering some similar sort of products in other parts of the world. For example, Caribbean had something like CCRF, where you create a fund for multiple countries, multiple Caribbean countries, for cyclonic risks and for earthquake risks. Then you have something called Africa Risk Capacity, which basically bunch of African countries buying coverage for floods as well as droughts. So multiple different types of perils depending on what that country needs, right? Those are all pulled together, and we are one of the reinsurance companies giving them financial protection. I think very similar concepts can be easily implemented in India. What perhaps is the key challenge here is there is nothing in the policy which earmarks certain percentage of the states as well as central's disaster mitigation funds towards these topics. It's not prescriptive enough. It is just left up to the state governments to decide how much money they want to pay in terms of premiums. Of course, there is some cap sort of associated with it, but there is nothing prescriptive. The moment it becomes prescriptive, it becomes more like a compulsion for the states rather than they buying it voluntarily. Now, I think you cannot really rely on all the states to come up voluntarily and sort of say that I want this insurance product. Rather, I would say people like 16 Finance Commission who have given a proper report around these topics, they should take up these topics in a fairly bold manner, and they need to be slightly prescriptive in this regard. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mangesh. Very, very insightful. In fact, what I hear is there is enough capacity, but we have to replicate some of the models what has been followed in other jurisdictions, and some of the states have taken that initiative. So that's good, and I think it is important for the industry that we also focus and bring together all the participants together, so we can provide enough and more coverage for some of these risks. So, Amit, coming back to you, very interesting question. As Indian insurers retain more predictable risk and use data more actively, what new reinsurance structures are becoming more relevant? Is it traditional treaties? Is it parametric covers, which we extensively discussed, or capital market solutions like a catastrophe bonds?
I mean, sorry. In a simple answer, it's all of above. So again, alluding to what Mangesh was saying, there is right now, there is a demand for reinsurance. There's also enough supply of reinsurance capital into the market. And reinsurance capital supply is coming from the traditional reinsurers from all across the world, be here as FRBs or be in GIFT City. And the products generally are catastrophe, excess of loss insurance, or proportional reinsurance. And they will continue to be the mainstream of reinsurance products a long time to come. Under that, some companies to optimize their spending as well as optimize volatility are buying structured solutions under that umbrella. So structured solutions are part of the reinsurance product suite, but still I would say fairly traditional reinsurance. As India grows, as an economy, as penetration increases, Viksit Bharat, then it really from that 2% of the world's insurance premium, it becomes much larger and very meaningful as a diversifying factor for reinsurance companies and for the world. There will be a certain point in time that other instruments will be required. And those could be pools, they could be capital market instruments, etc. In addition to that, as India grows, what we have seen, we've done a study, there are certain what we call risk hotspots emerging, okay, where a lot of industrial risk concentration or value concentration of risk is there. And they also, some of these also sit in slightly, hazardous zones in terms of climate. So the losses that can emerge in the future in terms of probabilistic losses are significant. And those areas to de-risk, companies' balance sheets as well as government's balance sheet will require special solutions at some point in time, which will basically be either pool or some sort of a sovereign risk support and a combination of everything. Basically, you want to bring in as much capital to support the risk, and then the product basically follows. So that's in a nutshell what I would say would emerge. But for present, the traditional products continue. Just one word on parametric. Parametric solutions are increasingly being talked about. They will also become part of, hopefully become part of the mainstay in the near future as a complement to indemnity products. The beauty of indemnity products is that it covers almost every kind of a situation and not just the triggered situation. And so there's a comfort around that. But parametric products will have their own role because of the ease of, let's say, payment. So it will complement, it may be a risk management tool. So as the market evolves, things like this will evolve.
Thank you, Amit. So, as I understand, this is still an evolving pace, and there are enough and more structured products or solutions available based on the type of risk. And increasingly, we'll be adopting some of these as the risk increases over a period of time. Uh, Shefali, this question again. Lloyds has recently announced a new strategic direction for its marketplace. How do you see it affecting capacity, product innovation, and collaboration opportunities for insurers and reinsurers in India?
Lloyds has very recently unveiled its new 5-year strategy. The strategy is a disciplined, market-led, necessary sharpening of its financial edge. Basically, the strategy focuses on underwriting performance, efficiency, and maximum utilization of its capital advantage to drive your increased returns. So, if I were to, look at it in terms of three aspects where it can, it can be relevant in terms of India. One is, like we were talking about, was basically the capacity. The first thing, Lloyds has a very unique capital advantage. So the capacity utilization becomes very important. Again, the discipline and the way the capital is used, the focus is now is not just on building capacity, just underwriting just for growth, just broad-based growth is not the objective. The objective is to make sure that whatever capacity has been deployed is deployed in a disciplined manner. It's not just about how much capacity is deployed, it's more about whether it's deployed efficiently and what is the value add with that capacity that we have created in the market. The second aspect is innovation. Innovation, again, is at the heart of the strategy. So, especially in India, because of because of our emerging risks like climate, parametric, and energy. So, those are the areas which require a deep amount of innovation. And like I said, these kind of concepts are very relevant for Lloyds because that's what the market is specializing in. And with that, Lloyds can very well support basically the creation of the products, the testing of the products, and also feeding back the whatever learnings have been there globally into the local markets. Again, the third aspect is the collaboration piece. So typically by its very nature, Lloyds is because of the syndicate nature of the market, it is collaborative in nature. And with a lot of partnerships, this, structured partnerships with the various territories, Lloyds intends to, build on the collaboration model even more. So the entire concept is more around creating, Lloyds as a global hub for specialist insurance. So that's the whole objective, basically.
Thank you, Shefali, for highlighting this. Very, very important is the way the capital is allocated today, more efficiently, that is the focus. Second focus area is on the innovation, which is really important in this day and age. And third is about the collaboration. So I think it's a good combination of all three aspects, which will kind of really make this Lloyds take this marketplace forward. And that is how I think it will integrate with the Indian market as well. So thank you so much. Mangesh, while we spoke about the sovereign risk transfer products and we also spoke about the impact of the climate change, I just wanted to understand your thoughts in terms of what policy change would help to make this crop and agriculture insurance more sustainable for insurers, reinsurers, and farmers. So you're covering all three parties here. Just
Sure. Think a fairly broad question, and I would rather break it down in a few pieces. Think the market of agriculture insurance as we see today has actually evolved over the last 50 years, right? About 50 years back, someone had thought of creating a farmer level sort of product, and people quickly realized that it's very difficult to serve millions of farmers in this country if you want to have a proper farmer level product. And then gradually policymakers felt that it's okay to compromise a little bit on the accuracy, but let's at least make sure that the products get scaled up. And that's how the predominance of yield index insurance products increased in the market. So today, if you see the current product that we have under Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, that is predominantly a yield index product where the agriculture yields are sort of sampled based on obviously some methodology, and based on that you decide whether a particular area is under agriculture stress or not, and depending on that you take the payout. Of course, to give better benefits to the farmers, the government also came up with certain farmer level product components which are now attached to PMFBY formula. Now this evolution took, as I said, more than 50 years, right? So I think a good thing here is that the Indian government does look at these policy change requirements time to time, and they have also involved the insurance companies as well as reinsurance companies in this process. It's a very consultative and democratic process. What has happened over the last 1.5 years is that people have started realizing that some of the tweaks that the government had made in the last 4 or 5 years, some of them have failed. There was this concept called cup and cap model, which had come in the agriculture insurance over the last 4 or 5 years. It has emerged, and it actually grew quite rapidly. What it essentially means for the state governments and the central government is the states and the central government act more like pseudo insurance companies apart from the risk that is shared by the insurance companies themselves. So part of the risk actually flows to the government under cup and cap models. And in lieu of that, the government also expects profit sharing in case you have a profitable outcome. I think on paper it looks like a brilliant idea. I think someone had mentioned just in the panel before that any public insurance scheme, I think the expectation, the reasonable expectation would be people should not make profits. I would put it this way, given that I represent a commercial entity, I would put it this way that in any government scheme, you should not make unreasonable profits, right? Because profits are there to take care of your loss years. Very simple. Now, what has happened is, in case of minute droughts or big floods here and there, the states have started realizing that it's a bad concept to take the risk because you are in a way acting as a pseudo insurance company, right? And that is going to change over the next 1 or 2 years. That is what the expectation is. I think the central government has started working on this concept. Apart from this, the key policy change that I would fight for is more subsidies. I think there's a bit of a notion here around, negative notion around subsidies, that subsidies actually cripple the sector. Subsidies, the moment they are there in the system, that means your sector is not sustainable. I would strongly question that notion. I think there are enough number of developed economies, including US, including China, where agriculture insurance products are very, very heavily subsidized, right? Indian government also does that, but what is missing perhaps is the increased sum insured, because the sum insured at which the farmers are getting benefits today, that is not adequate. So the moment you increase the sum insured, obviously you need to have increased subsidies as well there. So that is the second policy change I would fight for. Third one is really related to data sets. I think here again, a lot of credit goes to the government that they have thought through. They have, tried to do away with the manual crop cutting experiments over the last few years by coming up with yield models. They are not accurate. I think it will take some time for them to stabilize, but it's a good step. I think here there is a lot of scope for the insurance companies, reinsurance companies like us to join hands with the government and figure out what works best, and whatever is not working, we can voice out those concerns very quickly, and we can sort of shut those algorithms, and rather we can shift towards better algorithms. So broadly, these three policy changes will sort of make the sector more resilient and more sustainable for sure in the future. Thanks.
I think very interesting. Found a person who is pro subsidy. Generally, it's the other way around. So, and again, good history about the agriculture being evolving in the past 5 decades, and where is that we have progressed. And also a good comparison, I think, with other jurisdictions where, while we don't realize that some of these developed economies also support some of these products, and why can't we do it, right? So I think it's a good idea. I think we should work towards it as an industry, take it forward, see where we land, and if it is beneficial to all the three parties, even where, while the government should not be making profit, but again, if they are assuming some of the risks, then there is no harm in making profits as well. So, thank you. Amit, again, from a global perspective, with the imminent adoption of risks-based capital, which you touched upon earlier, and IFRS-based reporting, how does this development impact the reinsurance landscape? Could you share some practical insights? Because it's been implemented in various countries so far, and we are moving towards that, and it will be, in the next 1 or 2 years, it will be fully implemented.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, the regulator has already kind of notified that IFRS will be implemented. So regulator has already notified that the IFRS will be implemented, in a matter of time, and RBC then also follows within a certain period. Now, this is we had gap system for reporting as well as Solvency 1. And these were, systems that were there for a large number of years globally before the global shift towards risk-based capital and IFRS 17 started. And India is basically following the trend. And all this is a trend towards more accountability, more transparency, and more comparability of, the insurance industry's books. So IFRS, being very global in nature, will have very similar standards. GAAP had differences across countries. IFRS is reasonably well standardized as a principle. It's easier to compare insurance companies within a certain area or a country and compare them with the global cohort. So just from a high level, it's easier then to see how the Indian insurance industry, PNL, is performing compared to global peers. And that transparency automatically should bring more confidence into the industry and then draw in more capital, provided everything else is good, which means the industry has to be seen to be sustainable and dynamic, etc., because ultimately it's all about the capital that's being brought in. But it helps to do that. Risk-based capital is a fundamental shift as well from premium-based calculation of how much a company would need to provide for as capital for his operations, but to calculate per line of business what is the risk and how much then buffer you want to keep to do your business before and after reinsurance. So it's a much more technical, both of these are much more technical, actuarial ways of valuing companies and the balance sheets and P&L. And then, on the liability side, as well as on the asset side, a similar valuation and mark to market and everything thereof. So that will make the company's balance sheets hopefully more transparent, more robust, and more current, and will allow deployment of capital by companies in different lines of businesses according to the risk, according to its profitability, and the analysis of that. And it's going to be much more easier to talk about your business to investors, and hopefully less surprises, so more predictability about what you're promising as the economic outcome of your business and what's happening in actual and what corrective measures you're taking. So overall, these are things that are coming to the industry. I guess with this is the second phase of reforms after about 25 years of opening up, coming to the global stream, and added to that the policy changes on FDI and the GST relaxation on health and things like that. It's all a movement in the right direction for our industry.
Thank you so much, Amit. So effectively, it will increase transparency. Capital allocation will be much more efficient because of this risk-based capital. And the important point, what you also touched upon, is the way now it will be integrated and will be treated at parity with the other global reinsurers by bringing in those. So that's really important because today we are not comparing apple to apple. With this bringing in, I think it will be more parity in terms of how an Indian insurer or reinsurer is performing vis-a-vis a global insurer. So thank you. One more as an extension of this question, since we are talking about some of these reforms. So how do recent IRDAI changes around reinsurance regulations and order of preference impact the global reinsurers participate in Indian market? Again, if you could throw some light around this.
I think is a question for all of us. Yeah. So the recent IRDAI changes, in terms of simplifying the regulations, bringing them down to I think just about 14 or 15 from multiples of that, in terms of ease of business and ease of reporting. Is of course helping. In terms of the order of preference, if you specifically ask, the GIFT City participants have an option to become tier 2 or tier 3, which is the FRBs like us who have branches with capital here are tier 2. So there's been a leveling of the playing field, if you may ask, between GIFT City players and FRBs who are present with branches here. That is the change, which means in that sense there is more capacity and more competition as well on the same light into the market. This is a new phenomenon, and as India is growing, as the market develops, as the risks become larger and complex. Somebody said in the morning that US has 6,000 and we have just 60. So there's a lot of space for direct companies to sort of grow their business. As they grow, there's a lot of space then for reinsurance to grow. So anything which enhances the capacity of the market to absorb risk and diversify its risk is welcome. So I think there's space for everybody, and there's no need to think about it in a different way.
Thank you so much again. So again, what you're saying is, interestingly, they've enabled the option of GIFT City also for global insurers, reinsurers, by kind of giving at par order of preference. That is very interesting because more and more capacity will be needed in the years to come. And I think it will also kind of change the landscape in terms of how the products are designed today. So thank you so much, Amit, for that.
I'd just like to add here,
yes.
Akshay, that basically, we have definitely come a long way in our reforms. Basically, a lot has been done, but and it's been good progress, I must say. But there is still always enough headroom for doing more reforms in terms of accessing capacity, accessing the global market, and also the expertise. So one thing which Amit also touched upon is basically the the level playing field. So I think still there are more reforms that could help foreign reinsurers branches and the domestic players, so that they all level playing field. One simplest example is the taxation rate, which is different for the domestic reinsurers and the foreign reinsurance. Although typically we would write the same, suppose on the same risk, there would be different proportions of the risk carrying different tax rates. So that is another very simple example. Again, another aspect where I think any kind of reforms would be greatly helpful would be, to reduce frictional costs. So we could have frictional costs in regulatory, financial, operational areas. So if it's something like, where internal procedures at any level, if if they could be made more time bound, so bringing down the cost in terms of the time lost or the energy lost in using all these things to achieve closures in certain things, more predictability, I would say, more certainty, especially for we find a lot of issues with cross-border reinsurers. So there is a lot of uncertainty, unpredictability in terms of, say, again, a very classic, always the bone of contention of taxation of foreign reinsurers. So there is no certainty or predictability there. So if we could achieve anything, any kind of reforms, or to bring more certainty there in terms of even their ease of entry or exit, or any kind of reforms in the area of frictional costs would be most welcome.
Thank you, Shefali. Anything, Mangesh, on this aspect?
I think they have covered it quite well. I would simply state here that, again, I would like to emphasize, as far as global reinsurance capacity is concerned, there is just ample of capacity. Rather, it's a problem of plenty at the moment. I think what perhaps we need to focus clearly on is the primary pricing. Primary insurance pricing has gone for a toss for multiple different lines of businesses. It's quite scary when the risks which were sold at 60 crores are getting sold at 7 crores. I think that's something which you need to definitely focus on, because we don't want to ultimately have a situation where there is no alignment of interest between the insurance companies and the end client, as well as insurance companies and the reinsurance companies. So that's the problem that perhaps we need more attention on. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So I hear both the sides. While there is enough risk to cover, we also have an overcapacity sometimes, and there are some frictions while the enablement is still there. I hope that the industry and the government work towards it and get some more clarity or bring parity in terms of the enablements which is there. So with this, I think we are closer to, as in the time has already gone. So again, thank you so much, Shefali, Mangesh, and Amit, for sharing such valuable insights, practical insights from your experience. Audience, yes.
See, of late, Indian market has become very, very price sensitive. There were days when premiums were linked to the risk management practices of the industry, which cannot be done now. Industry well managed and badly managed are being seen as the same now. Now, with this scenario, with this kind of falling prices, including discounts on NatCat perils, where the NatCat perils are increasing by the day, in this kind of a scenario, how as reinsurers to continue to operate in this market, and as reinsurers, what you can do to bring in discipline in the market?
Yes,
So one of the things IFRS will do is, you predict a certain CSM, which is basically your margin, and if you cut rates, your margin, and then you'll have to explain it very clearly within that quarter. So, this is why we're going into this regime partially, I guess. That would be my answer in a very broad.
That's a very good answer, I must appreciate. But again, you have to wait for the regulator to come in. But as reinsurers, I'm sure you can do something to discipline because you have the leverage, because you support the
Yeah,
insurance.
so on facultative reinsurance for large projects and large risks, basically which are RI driven, RI driven prices, come with a certain, quotation and expectation of that. But global prices are also way down. What is happening right now is, as Mangesh said, there's over capacity, and it's part of the reinsurance cycle. We all have to, adjust to that. However, not all risks are under the control of or pricing, let's say, guidance or facultatively driven, I would say, of reinsurance companies. Base portfolio and the middle portfolio is basically with the insurance companies, and for that, the actuarial models that they use needs to be robust enough, in my view.
Thank you. So I think, thank you so much, everyone, the panelists. I think after today's discussion, for me, it is one important takeaway is that reinsurance is no longer just about transferring risk. It is all about enabling resilience. It's all about innovation. And it is all about long-term confidence, market confidence. So thank you so much. With that, I thank our panelists and audience for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists, for that very insightful dialogue. We would like to now present you all with the mementos. May I request Mr. Praveen Vashisht on the dais to present you the mementos. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.